Okay. Whew.
Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Welcome to my channel on the couch. Today we're doing a tag. I was tagged by Rebeccah Rodriguez, so as you're all cringing, you know who to thank for this video. We're all looking at you, Rebeccah. I was tagged by Rebeccah Rodriguez, and if you have not watched her channel, then you need to reconsider your life choices because she's amazing. And honestly, you should stop this video right now. Yes, I'm telling you to stop my video. Stop everything you're doing and go watch her video of this because her cringeworthy old writing was like amazing. And like I was totally sucked into all of her old stories. I mean, okay, this is how good she is. She read an old fanfic of hers that was a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle fanfic. Oh my gosh. I was like so sucked in. I was like, man, this is really good. She's amazing and I love watching her channel. So you need to go watch her, subscribe to her, love her. She tagged me in this video. This tag was actually originally created by Melissa Mohi and Holly Davis. So you can also go and watch their videos. I will link all of those down below for your watching enjoyment. And without further ado, I have a giant bin down here. It's full of a lot of old journals and stuff like this, but this is where all of my old writing is kept. So we're gonna dig through this and find some good old stuff to read with you guys that'll make you cringe to high heaven. This was my original Untamable manuscript. I was almost 15. The mature end of 14 when I drew that, but we're not going to be looking at that today because spoilers. Oh boy. Okay, here we go. Here are some of my old cringeworthy writings. So I'm probably just going to go by age. I'm not going to show you all of this stuff because this video would be a million years long. So I'm just going to pick through and find the best stuff. And I'm actually going to turn off the camera and resituate this so I can pull you in closer so my face is not in shadow. And then I will show you the best stuff that I can find. Okay, now we've got you scooted in a little bit closer. Sorry that the lighting is not the best. I have to film this in the evening time because I was not able to do it in the morning. So I started writing when I was 8 years old. I think I mentioned that a bajillion times on my channel. So the first story that I ever wrote was a Little Mermaid retelling, and it was called The Legend of Two Worlds. I don't know if that was the original name. This was a book that I was I kind of wrote several revisions over the course of ages like 8 through 11, maybe 12 and 13. I was kind of constantly revising this story, and I wish I could show you the original draft, but I threw it away when I was little. Long story short, my older sisters were showing it off to their friends and laughing about it, and I got so embarrassed that I threw the entire thing away, and it was thick. I mean, it was several chapters long, lots of illustrations. Oh, it's like one of the biggest regrets of my life that I threw that away, but I was a kid. I mean, what did I know? I didn't know that one day it would be worth $1 billion. But I do have some of the revisions that I wrote as I was getting older, so I don't have the 8-year-old version, but I do have like 10, 11, 12. So I'm just going to read one of those. Oh, but this is a book cover that I tried to make for it when I was younger. And there's no date on this. My dad is an artist, and he always taught me to date everything that you ever draw or paint or whatever. But I did not date this. I think this must have been, I was like maybe 13 or 14 when I drew this, but this was the cover for the book. So this was my main character, Lisi, and she of course fell in love with the stable boy. She was a mermaid, and there's like them riding horses, and anyways. So I made my own book cover. So I'm just going to read a little clip of whatever I can find from this. Oh gosh, it's pretty bad, but okay, here it goes. This is chapter 1. I'm not going to read the whole chapter. I'll just read until I can't take it anymore. Chapter 1. Lisi sat in her room, brushing her long, curly blonde hair and talking to her 19-year-old sister, Leona. I don't know why Father insists on introducing me to so many men. I've never been interested in even one, she said. Oh, Lisi, I'm sure you'll meet someone you like. I did. No, I've decided I shall never get married. Leona put her arm lovingly around her sister. Now, Lisi, Don't be ridiculous. You're still young, ... Humph! I'm 17, said Lisi. There was a silence. Then Lisi broke it by sighing. I'm going to bed. Leona kissed Lisi on the forehead and left. Lisi lay in her bed for a while, thinking. Both of her sisters were married, Leona and Laura. Laura had been married for 4.5 years and had a 2-year-old son named Jekneziel. Leona had been married for 2 years and had an 18-month-old daughter named Hepzibah. Lisi had never even been close to getting married. Oh, and she's 17. Whatever will she do? And believed it would never happen. The next morning, Linda, Lisi's best friend, came over to the castle. Lisi knew what this was about. Oh, Linda, come in, she said, with a smile. Let's talk about this in my room. Linda nodded in agreement. They made their way to Lisi's room, and when they got there, they locked the door and sat on the bed. Okay, Linda said, tomorrow night, my sisters will be gone, and I'll have the house to myself. Then we can try out some magic and see how well I do. Linda came from a family of witches. She lived with her 4 older witch sisters who were teaching her how to do magic. She and Lisi wanted to try out a spell for fun, but were sure Linda's sisters wouldn't allow it. So they waited for a chance. Oh, yay! Lisi squealed with excitement. But what should we do? Oh, my sisters have got tons of books full of spells, Linda said. We can look through those and see what looks fun. A knock came to the door, followed by the voice of Lisi's servant. My lady, your father returns home today from Prince Clementine's castle. When? Lisi asked. Even now he makes his way through the gate. As Lisi rushed out of her room, she's a mermaid, so maybe she was like rushing swimming, you know? I don't know what that was. As Lisi rushed out of her room, she called back to Linda, 2 exciting things at once. Prince Clementine was yet another prince who would be coming to see Lisi, and if all went well, in the king's eyes anyway, Clementine would ask for Lisi's hand in marag. Lisi waited patiently by the castle door, but once her father was out of his dolphin-drawn carag, she had her arms around him. Welcome home, father, she cried joyfully. It's good to be home, the king said with a smile. And I brought someone with me. As he moved to the side, Lisi could see Prince Clementine emerging from the carag. When he saw Lisi, he grabbed her hand and kissed it in a way that made Lisi uncomfortable. He never let go of her hand, and he never took his eyes off of her, even when he spoke to the king. You didn't tell me that your daughter was so beautiful, King Turret. So it would be like this. You didn't tell me your daughter was so beautiful, King Turret. Lisi tried to make him look away from her, so she turned to Linda, who had followed her outside, and smiled. But it was no use. He kept clutching her hand and staring at her with a look of want in his eyes. Oh, this poor 17-year-old girl. She needs someone to marry her, but she doesn't like anybody. Dang it, it's so hard to be a beautiful princess. That was chapter 1 of The Legend of Two Worlds, at least one of the many drafts. 3 guesses who my favorite Disney princess was. It was Jasmine. Whenever I played princesses, I always had to beat up every suitor that came to call because I was like, I'm not a prize to be won. I was really into that. First story, down. So yes, even though I write a lot of historical fiction nowadays, I started out in the fantasy realm. So first it was the mermaids, and then the next thing that I wrote, that I remember writing anyways, and that I can find evidence of, is another fantasy. So this one was called Within One Emerald. And this, I actually really like this story. I mean, it has really evolved. This is actually a story that I do plan on writing someday, but because it's a fantasy, I am intimidated. because there's a lot to fantasy, to creating your own world. And even though I've been creating this one since I was about 11 years old, I'm pretty sure I was 11 when I started writing this one, I'm intimidated because there are several worlds and lots of different species of creatures and humanoids and, lots of different things like that. But I really, really like the story, and I really like the characters, and I'm still in love with them, and I still come up with ideas for this. So this is kind of something that I'm slowly building in the background of my historical fictions that I write, and have been since I was 11 years old. But it started out as something very, very cringeworthy. Oh, my foot's falling asleep! Ouch. Okay. So within one emerald, chapter 1, a world without food or water. This is what it looks like. It's beautiful, isn't it? I know. Cabrast was only 19, and yet he had adventured to every bit of land in his world, which was called Sharataya, in parentheses, except for the great city. He was handsome and had gone through much storms, wind, snow, even a few small battles. He had curly jet black hair and emerald green eyes. He longed for more adventure, but never found it. He had been staying in his old cabin with the only family he had, a mumbleroom named Zephani. A mumbleroom is sort of like a puppy, but it has a snout that sags like a camel's does. The rest of his head, including his ears, was like a lop-eared bunny. They have beady black eyes, the chest, front, and back paws of a puppy, and the tail of a camel. They usually walk on all fours. They are very cute, and will curl up on your lap and sleep if you are sitting down. When you are troubled, they will lick your face and comfort you. Aww. And I even drew a little picture. I did not draw that. I can tell you right now, my older sister drew that for me from my description. But it is pretty cute. Obviously, this is the time period of my life when I was playing Neopets a lot on the computer. Shout out if you know what Neopets was and if you played with that as well. They come in different colors. His was black with white spots. Cabrast longed for a chance to explore other worlds. Soon there was no food or water in Cabrast land. The birds and animals left, perhaps to find what they once had, food and water. Even the bugs had left, which also left Zephani hungry too. Mumblerooms eat worms. Oh. Cabrast finally decided to leave his once beautiful land and go to the master of that world. He packed only his books and clothes, the essentials. As he packed what little food he had, he looked down at his feet, for something fuzzy, soft, and small had rubbed against his leg. "Zeth," he said, "I'm sorry, but I don't have any worms for you. I know you're hungry. Here, try this. I know it doesn't taste like a worm," he said, handing a chicken leg to the hungry mumbleroom. No, not like a worm at all. Who took it with its front paws, sniffed it, and looked up at Cabrast. "There's no point in turning it away. It's all we've got." Zephani turned back to the chicken and ate it. Cabrast only had half a fish, one chicken wing, one loaf of bread, and an archant. An archant is an orange fruit the size of a golf ball with blue spikes, because not all the food in this can be normal food. He walked over to his water jug and poured all the water into his water pouch. The water only filled half of the pouch. Cabrast gave a sigh. "We'll have to stop at one of the villages on our way for food and water," he told Zephani, who had just jumped onto his shoulder and curled up. Mumblerooms were the size of a raccoon's. Cabrast picked up his bags, food and water, and walked out of the cabin to his togataya. Togataya were used like horses. They were the same size, but looked nothing like them. They had floppy ears and the head of a kangaroo. In fact, their whole body was like a kangaroo, but their front and back paws only had two large curved toes? I think that's what that says. When you rode them, they used not only their back legs, but also their front. He was burgundy. He placed the saddle and reins on it, then attached all of his things to the saddle. Then he clipped a rather large fanny pack around his waist, lifted Zephani's sleepy body off of his shoulder and gently placed him in it. That's a big fanny pack if this thing's the size of a raccoon. Zephaniah curled up in the pack as Cabrast swung his leg over the Togataya's saddle, and with one last glance at his cabin, he set off. That's chapter 1. Very good. So, yeah, content-wise, that's pretty good for a kid, right? Not bad. Writing could use some help, but it seems that as I got older, my writing slowly got better, but the content got worse. So this is the second draft of Within One Emerald, and this is the first chapter. Prepare yourself. This is where it gets really cringeworthy. Cabrast Olashika lived in a cottage in a little quiet town called Tamalia. There wasn't a girl in town who wasn't madly in love with him. But that wasn't so hard to believe. He was extremely handsome. Underlined, extremely. It wasn't easy to not fall in love with a 20-year-old man who was tall, strong but gentle, thoughtful, and who had dark, slightly curled hair and the most amazing green eyes ever. He even had a nice tan. Woohoo! Bonus! He had read so many books about adventure that he wanted to go on one himself one day. In the meantime, life would go on as it had since he had moved to this cottage when he was 16, old enough to leave his grandparents' house. They had died when he was 17. He would get up at 6 a.m. every morning, go to work at the lumber factory, come home at 4 p.m. with dinner for him and his pet Momblaroom Zephaniah. Zephaniah was white with brown speckles everywhere and a big brown spot on his back. His mother's name was Zroth. She belonged to Cabrast's mother, but died after giving birth to Zephaniah. So I like how Zephaniah has like a little bit of family history now in this second draft. But no description of what a Momblaroom is. Lost that somewhere. I don't know, was that not good enough to keep? After dinner was when it would all begin. It all started with a knock. Cabrast would open the door to find 2 to 3 girls, all beaming brightly at the sight of him. He showed them inside, and by the time they had sat down, there was another knock, and more girls would show up. This would happen several times a day. By the time all the single girls in town were gathered in his living room, somehow every day he found some way to entertain them. The girls would laugh so hard that each day he expected their lungs to come out. Luckily, they never did. Oh my gosh. Thank goodness their lungs didn't come out. The girls would laugh so hard that each day he expected their lungs to come out. Luckily, they never did. He didn't mind that much. I mean, it's okay having all these girls after me. Oh my gosh. He didn't mind that much. But sometimes it could get annoying to be followed everywhere he went. He often wished he had at least an hour of privacy. Yeah, this poor guy, I mean, what a life. He's so hot. He can't do anything about it. There's always all these girls after him, and he has to find some way to entertain them. I mean, this poor humble guy. Oh yeah, I do have to read this. This is too good. This is too good. One day after work, when the first knock came on the door, he was quite surprised to find only one young woman, Rochelle. "Oh, Rochelle, come in." "Why, thank you, Cabrast." Rochelle was a beautiful 17-year-old girl with dark hair and eyes. She was wearing a pink skirt that went to her knees and a white sleeveless shirt with a pink ribbon in her hair and white sandals. Very thorough description. She sat on the couch and crossed her pretty legs. Cabrast waited for the next knock, but for some strange reason, it didn't come. Where's all the girls? So he sat on the couch across from Rochelle. Cabrast couldn't think what to say. He felt uncomfortable being alone in a house with one girl, especially when she was the most beautiful of the bunch. So he asked politely, "Where are the others?" Rochelle smiled mischievously and answered, "They went on a day-long picnic out of town." Cabrast thought it strange that all of the girls in town would go except for one, so he asked the next question, "Why didn't you go with them?" Rochelle smiled that mischievous smile again and whispered, "I told them I was ill." Oh my gosh. Why? Cabrast asked, fearing the answer. Rochelle raised one eyebrow. Isn't it obvious? She stood up, and remembering his manners, he did too. She walked toward him and sat on the couch next to where he was sitting, and he sat back down next to her, and she took his hand, making him feel even more uncomfortable. Because I wanted to be with you. You're with me every day. Humph! With those ridiculous, giggling girls. Why would you want to be with me? I'm boring. She scooted closer to him, brought her face closer to his, and looked into his eyes. Cabrast, you are anything but boring, and I wanted to be with you because I love you. I always have. And then, before Cabrast could stop her, she threw herself on top of him and kissed him. Oh my gosh. He pushed her away and stood up. No, Rochelle, he said. I don't want you to think of me that way. Everyone else does, said Rochelle, standing up and taking his hand. He yanked it back and folded his arms across his chest. We're just friends. I don't want anyone to think of me that way. If you don't want anyone to think of you that way, then you'll never get married. The worst fate that could ever befall a person. That's not what I meant. I meant all of you girls in Tamalii. There was a silence. Then, well, what if I want to be more than just friends? Cabrast took a deep breath and thought of what he could tell her. Then, I'm afraid I won't see you anymore. Rochelle looked down at her knees for a time, then looked up at Cabrast with a sly smile on her face. Cabrast, she said innocently. How do I look today? You once said that I looked good in pink. Cabrast knew what she was doing. She knew how beautiful she was, and when she batted her eyes, Cabrast took a few steps back. Don't do that, he said. You already know what I think. No, I don't, Cabrast. Why don't you tell me? Oh my gosh, this is so hard to read. It's so cringeworthy. Cabrast had had enough of this. It was time to take action. He pointed at Rochelle and yelled, Zeth, sick 'em! Immediately, Zeth and I bounded towards Rochelle, knocked her on her back, and began licking her face, giving Cabrast time to run for his life! He ran till he got to the lumber factory. He went to his boss and told him that he had decided to work an extra hour that day, and he was put to work. Oh my gosh, that's about enough of that. That's about all I can take of that. It's like I hit puberty, and then like all I could think about was like marriage is the most important thing, and dating and sexual tension and If anybody can beat that, I dare you. I dare you out there. You hear me, YouTube? I dare you. I dare somebody to find something as cringeworthy as this in their old writing stash. You know what? I bet you all have stuff that's that cringeworthy, but no one is brave enough to read it online. Why am I? I have issues. I cannot believe I'm reading these online, but I'm doing it anyways. It's just too fun. Okay, and then this was the first book that I actually posted on the internet for other people to read. Throughout my high school years, I was posting my stories on fictionpress.com, and this was the first one I ever wrote, so I was definitely 13 years old when I wrote this, and I'm just going to read the first page of it. Will Ingalls leaned over the handrail on the Louisa May freight ship, watching the turquoise waves rise over the rocky Boston Bay only to crash down again smoothly. The year was 1774, and for Will, the life of a sailor was not only the simplest, most adventurous that could be lived, but it was also the only one he had ever known. His mother had died when he was a small child, too small to remember, leaving him to be raised on a freight ship by his father, Captain Al Ingalls. Now Will was 17 years old and fast becoming a man. A seagull flew overhead, his beady black eyes searching for a discarded fish or crab. Another cried triumphantly before swooping down and snatching up the fish intestines that some fishermen obviously had not thought good enough to keep. A fight broke out between the two before the bigger one got away with most of the prize and the smaller with whatever he could snatch up. Just a random little seagull fight going on in the background. Will closed his eyes. The salty ocean breeze blew his auburn hair around his forehead and ears. Most boys kept their hair long and tied behind their head with a ribbon, and though that was the style, some boys, like Will, could get away with having it no longer than 3 inches and still look incredibly handsome. Will inhaled deeply of the crisp ocean air and held it in for a few moments, savoring its freshness, before blowing it all out in a big morning sigh and turning to help the crew unload crates of British goods onto the harbor. He bent down and lifted one of the heavy crates onto his shoulder, something most boys his age could not do so well, and walked off the ship. So clearly I had like this fetish for 17-year-old boys who were unnaturally strong and muscled and incredibly handsome. Oh, well, of course, I was 13. I mean, what 13-year-old girl isn't into that, right? "This how you build up them muscles of yours, Will?" Jerry grunted teasingly, carefully setting down the crate of British tea in his arms. Will chuckled in response. "No more than you, Jerry." Curly laughed behind Will. He'd obviously been listening. "Nah," he cried. "We all do this. Will's got some kind of secret or summit." Jerry chuckled in agreement, wiping the perspiration from his brow with the back of his arm. "That he has, Curly mate, that he has." A few days before, there had been a wrestling match on board the Louisa May. The crew had all gathered around to watch Jerry and Will. Will had beat Jerry big time, just as he had every other man on board. Everyone had laughed at how ridiculous it was that the youngest crew member could beat every one of them at wrestling. He's amazing! Even the men think so. "Now that's not even funny," Ed had called out, his face red with laughter all the same. "Oh yeah," Will hooted. "I've got a special little potion hidden away from you lot." They were all walking back onto the ship now to get more crates. "At night," Will continued, "while you're all sleeping and unawares, I drink an entire mug of the stuff." He flexed his muscles. "Look like it's been working all right." All the men howled at that, and there were a few whistles. Because this is how men are with each other. Clearly. Will may have been the youngest on board the Louisa May, but every crew member admired and respected him. The fact that he was the captain's son had nothing to do with it. The boy had a great sense of humor and knew how to have fun without alcohol. Everyone knew that he was not someone to double-cross. He avoided fights as much as possible, but when he was in them, whether it was a fight with words or fists, he always won. 'Cause he's perfect. "Will, mate." Henry was jogging over to the group of men. He stopped at Will. "Bill and Todd are at it again." Will sighed. "Well, go tell 'em to get back to work." "You know they won't listen to no one that ain't the captain, 'cept you." Now the others joined in. "Go get 'em, lad. Come on, Will." Will scratched his head and thought, "Well..." "Go on, work your magic," Jerry said, making everyone laugh again. Will shrugged. "All right, but don't you all stop your work to watch like you did in Tokyo." Their heads bobbed up and down as the men moved faster to show that they were getting back to work. Will nodded in satisfaction before jogging over to where Bill and Todd stood flirting with 3 young ladies, as always. 3 young ladies who looked less than pleased to be talking to 2 middle-aged, beer-bellied sailors, but their good manners keeping them where they stood. These 2, Bill and Todd, were constantly having to be told to get back to work when the Louisa May docked somewhere for goods. No matter what country they were in, Todd and Bill went after the girls before seeing to their duties. Oh, Bill and Todd. Having been raised on a ship and away from the high-class women, Will didn't know how to act around them. He's so clueless and handsome and muscled. And so he marched towards the group, completely ignoring the 3 young ladies, something that on its own was extremely rude. "Bill, Todd," he said firmly. The 2 turned, and their faces split into wide, tobacco-stained grins as they saw who had addressed them. "Ah, Will, me lad," Bill growled, giving the boy a hearty slap on the back. "This is Alice, Annabelle, and..." "Bill," Will interrupted. "I could care less who these lasses are. They could jump in the ocean and drown for all I care. They concern us no more than the women in Tokyo did. You can have your fun with the villagers once every bloody piece of goods, down to the very last button, is off of that ship. These dames ain't leaving the country. They're still gonna be here when the work is done. Now go get your beer belly on that ship." Everybody loves Will. Bill and Todd's tooth-decaying smiles faded, and their bushy eyebrows lowered in mild shame. "Sorry, Will," they said almost in unison before turning and heading for the ship. Will was about to follow them when one of the girls spoke up. "I beg your pardon," she cried. "I've never been so insulted." Will turned back, alarmed. He had never really spoken to a female before, and he almost seemed surprised that this one could talk. He got his first good look at them now. All 3 looked to be about 16. How convenient for him. The one who had spoken was a redhead covered in freckles. Her green silk dress and matching hat added a touch of elegance to her figure. That green dress adds a touch of elegance to your figure, I say. By Jove, by golly! The second was blonde and round. Oh, the second was blonde with round brown eyes, like a doe. And the third was unlike anything he had ever seen. Of course, he rarely saw women. Her rich, dark hair was the color of coffee beans, and her eyes, pale robin egg blue, were framed with long, mischievous lashes. Apparently I liked that word, mischievous, describing a girl. Her skin glowed like china. Her pastel blue gown made her hair even darker and richer than ever, and her eyes bluer than the sky itself. Those same eyes almost seemed to burn into Will's skin now as she glared at him in shock. Just where do you come off, treating ladies in such a manner? The blonde beauty demanded. Will muttered, unable to understand what he had done wrong. He had never unintentionally offended anyone in his life. Did you hear, Elizabeth? The redhead said. Did you hear what he called us? Lasses! Dames! She looked at Will as though he were covered in garbage. The young lady with the dark hair shook her head back and forth in amazed anger. The boy surely has no manners, she replied. Will folded his arms across his chest in amusement. Well, you lot ain't so decent yourselves, he said, his voice challenging. Where do you come off, flitting about the harbor in your nice things and distracting me crew? The maiden with the dark hair's jaw dropped and her eyebrows lowered. Distracting your crew? We never! Can't someone go for a morning walk in their own town nowadays? Will didn't want to waste his time with these girls. Go jump off a cliff, he said, waving them off as though they were flies. Do the world a favor. Oh, the brunette's mouth was opening and closing in wordless fury. She finally cried, never have I been so... Oh! She linked arms with her two friends. Come away, dears, she said. It appears to me that someone doesn't want us to flit about the harbor. And with that, they stormed off. That's amazing. This is amazing. Well, it's pretty thick, too. Anyways, this is still online. You can still read this on fictionpress.com, this and other stuff that I wrote. But I'm not going to tell you how to find it, because it was written under a pen name, and you will never know. Never!
I win.
Oh, and here's a quick little bonus. Rebecca, you wanted to see some more of my old sketches, and so I have brought some out for you. Well, I mean, I didn't bring them out for you, but I just kind of found them while I was going through this. Let's see, what have I got? Here's something random. Again, there's no date on this. I don't know why, but hey, look, it looks like some fairies, and they're like living under the roots of a tree. That's kind of cute, right? Maybe I was 11 or 12 when I drew this, but have no idea, and I didn't write a date on it, so we'll never know. And this one was more like a mystery. This is actually another one that I would like to write. It's also got food stains or something on it, I don't know. This is another one that I'd like to get back to because it was kind of cool. It was like a ghost story / mystery with like hidden treasure and murder, and it was kind of exciting, actually. I'd like to get back to that. But anyways, I was Liesl Metcalf. Okay, these are funny because these are obviously written from when I was in school and I was supposed to be doing my math homework because there's like math all over the back, and then I got distracted and instead was drawing my characters in my math book. So it was just like, oh, I'm pretty sure that's another one of Liesl and Olivia again. And like, instead of doing my math, I was writing character sketches because we're writers. This is what we do. Character sketches when we should be doing our math homework. This is the beginning of my outlining phase. When I started outlining as a kid. Aw, so sweet. Little outliner in progress. This is another one of those that I should have been doing my math homework, but I was lost in my stories. This is a character from that fantasy story that I plan to continue someday. Her name was Gypsy. This was one from, I had a nightmare and then it became one of the evil creatures in this fantasy that I'm still planning on writing. And I drew it So these were rats, and they're really creepy. Ugh, I get creeped out every time I accidentally see that. So there you go, Rebecca. There's a little bonus for you. There's a couple of random drawings that I was able to find. So yeah, that's my old cringeworthy writing, and of course there's probably a ton more, but this video is long enough as it is, and I think I've made you all cringe enough for one day. I've certainly cringed enough for one day. So I'm gonna put all this stuff back, hide it away in the dark where no one will ever see it again. But yeah, that concludes this video. This was so much fun. Thank you, Rebecca, for tagging me. I actually really enjoyed doing this. Are you still here? Are you still watching this? I'd be surprised if anyone is still watching this. If you made it through like the most cringeworthy part, I applaud you, honestly. So good. So now I am going to tag a couple of people in this, and first I'm going to tag Super Cossack and then also Peggy Spencer to do this tag. I am really curious to see what you guys have. If you've got any old cringeworthy writing that you are willing to share, it would be really fun to hear. So yeah, that concludes this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you so much for keeping with it. And maybe next I should read some of my current stuff, just so you know that I've gotten better. Not a whole lot better, probably, but I've gotten better. I mean, better than these anyways. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye! I started writing, okay, let's, okay, starting over. I'm trying to give them different voices because there's no dialogue tag. Someone is trying to overthrow the kingdom. Enemies of the empire! Invaders from the north! Egyptians, do you think? I'm starting to lose my voice from that last dramatic reading.
Would you come and take a walk with me? We'll cross over the mountains, we'll reach the pale blue sea.